Hi, thank you for joining me for this recap of Coffee with Katie, where I share insights from conversations I have with other women during our monthly coffee gathering. The goal in getting together is to create a comfortable space where we can discuss topics with a financial related bent to them. I'm Katie Brown. I'm a certified financial planner, and I've had the privilege of serving families for nearly 20 years. In this month's Coffee with Katie, we discussed financial date night. In a recent study at Utah State University, it was cited that couples that argue over money more than once a week are 30% more likely to get divorced. And I'm sure many of you have heard that finances is typically the number one reason that couples cite when filing divorce papers. And it's not always a lack of money that they're fighting over. Sometimes it's the management of the money. I see wealthy couples, unfortunately, are just as likely to get divorced over money as well, and they may have concerns over the support that they provide to their children versus the legacy to be left. Or there could be an imbalance in the control of the family finances that creates stress. So in our most recent get-together, we talked about different ways that families manage their finances, and I'd like to share those with you along with some tips and questions that you might want to bring to your next financial date night. So a couple of different ways that we talked about managing the finances. The number one way that I see couples and that we talked about during our most recent get-together is for one spouse to manage the bank account, i.e. paying the bills. They know the money that's coming in each month and they know the money that's going out from that operating account each month. Whereas the other spouse might manage the investments and they have a good understanding of how things are funded and approximately where everything is at. And the key here is communicating both sides of that. So on a monthly basis, checking in to make sure that there is an understanding of those short-term monies moving in and out. And I would say no less than quarterly, checking in on the big picture to understand where the investments are at, how to access them, how they get funded, and just to have a general understanding on that side. So another way that I see families managing their finances and that we discussed is more of an even divide. So perhaps both spouses are managing some of the bills and some of the investments. And as life ebbs and flows with responsibilities and time, they can cover each other and they have a good understanding of both sides. That could be a great way to approach it as well. But there, once again, communication is key and making sure that there's a good understanding of who's covering what when, because that might not be clear if they can both do both sides. So if there is a delineation, make sure you discuss it. Now, one way that I suggest avoiding when managing finances is creating almost a parent-child type of relationship or role, where one spouse might be given an allowance and the other spouse manages all the finances and all of the investments. And when asked, that spouse says, "Don't worry, I've got it." That's not good. That's not a good situation for anybody because it puts undue stress on the person that's controlling it. It might make them feel as if there's additional pressure on them and it's their responsibility. And it could leave the other spouse in the dark and perhaps feeling insecure about their financial future. And I hate to say it, ladies, but typically it's us that's in the dark. And it's not acceptable. So what I would suggest is bringing the conversation up, because both of you, it is extremely important for all types of money management for everyone to understand where everything is at, how to access it, what's coming in and what's going out. So that leads me to a few questions that you might want to ask at your next financial date night. And questions could be centered around how you value money, or they can be centered around perhaps some goals. So if we start with some goals, you might want to ask the question, a year from now, what do we want to be different with our finances? Or you might ask, in 5 years or in 10 years, what do we want our life to look like? If you're not already retired, how do you envision retirement? And if you are, is this what we envisioned for our retirement? Or what would we like to do differently? And also ask, what are 3 things on your bucket list that maybe you haven't accomplished yet that are an absolute must? So those are all kind of fun conversations that you can have on the goals-based side. On the values-based side, you may want to ask questions more around, what do you enjoy spending money on? Or what do you not like to spend money on? If there was a windfall of, say, $2 million, what would you do with it? And if you haven't already had the conversation, I would ask too, what was money like growing up? You might be surprised to learn how much your past experiences with money influence the decisions and the actions that you take now. And it may give each other a greater appreciation for how you manage your money personally. So those are some questions that you may want to ask. Now, if it's not comfortable for you to ask those questions, or you feel like you're not quite there to kind of tackle that conversation, maybe start with writing each other a letter. Write down what your goals are and why they're important. Write down how you envision managing the money in the family. Who's going to be responsible for the different roles, and how are you going to communicate about it? And maybe even share some from your past experiences. Write down what money was like when you were young and how you feel that influences you now. Those are all important things, I think, to talk about, but if you're not comfortable with the conversation, start with jotting it down. And with anything in marriage, always remember, treat each other with respect, listen, and be willing to compromise. So thank you very much for joining me for this recap with Coffee with Katie. I would love to hear your stories if you wanted to share your experiences with how you manage money, or financial date night questions that you have, or tips, or anything along those lines. Feel free to reach out to me at kbrown@mortonbrownfw.com. Thank you. Until next time.